Imagine for a second you're on your way home at night and you've missed the public bus. The streets are dimly lit, and to your horror, you can just about make out a horrifically tall and mangled being in front of you. But which one is it? One of the surreal, unhinged creations of Dr.Nowhere, or the iconically brutal and disturbing entities of Trevor Henderson? One of these is going to be way worse than the other, but which one is it? Today we're going to be looking into Dr. Nowhere versus Trevor Henderson, and to be honest, they both put up a good fight. So let's find out for certain if Dr. Nowhere versus Trevor Henderson isn't close. Now before I move forward, I just want to state that I am huge fans of both of these artists, and I love both of their work, and I've made tons of videos on both of them. This is purely just going to be a points based system, and each point is like opinionated, and if at any point you disagree with who I give the point to, if you make a good point, I'll like your comment. With that being said, let's get into the first category, being comparing their most viral entities. Starting with Trevor Henderson, we have Cartoon Cat and of course Siren Head, the former of which is essentially a cosmic parasite, a rot so to speak, that disguises itself as a cartoon character like something straight from Bendy. It can assumably take any size or form it wishes, along with being anywhere and everywhere at once. Cartoon Cat assumably devours flesh and thrives off of it. No one knows whether it's immortal, but based on what we know, there's a pretty good chance it is. On top of being one of the most viral entities, it is also described by Trevor himself to be one of the most overpowered, being the top of the too late category, even being placed ahead of the man with the upside down face. Alternatively, his other most famous creation, Siren Head, is a sort of mimic of a being, and it's really what broke him out into being a famous indie horror artist. Siren Head is essentially designed to look and sound like many different similar shaped structures, assumably making it harder to detect before it's too late. While being 12 meters tall and relatively slow on 2 feet, it has been brought to my attention that it can run on all fours, and when it does, it becomes significantly faster, being said to be able to keep up with a speeding car. So in my case, that would be about 100 miles per hour at least. As for the reference, they were talking about it being able to catch a couple who were driving for their lives. Siren Head doesn't just make siren noises despite how it looks, it also can imitate any person or noise it hears, kind of like SCP-939. Although despite this, it doesn't seem to actually need to hear them in order to repeat them, rather getting them through a certain radio frequency that is built into its biology. Both Siren Head and Cartoon Cat are extremely disturbing entities, so what are the Dr. Nowhere counterparts?
That something is following you as soon as you turn off the lights? Well, worry not. We have a brilliant solution.
There is nothing that follows you after you turn off all the lights in the house.
There is nothing that follows you after you turn off all the lights in the house.
In my opinion, they would be none other than the Boiled One and the Locust, as they by far have more views than anything else on Nowhere's channel, with the Boiled One being classified as his own analog horror and essentially being the manifestation of a Japanese war criminal that was somehow turned into a demonic creature after his death. The Boiled One, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist in the normal plane of reality. Rather, it acts like a mind virus, first infecting every digital device, then corrupting anyone who views it and remembers his face. This will eventually shut down every nerve in the body, apart from the eyes, forcing the victim to just lay in eternal torment while the Boiled One manifests in front of them, torturing and just overall just scaring the hell out of them. Not to mention, it is assumed that the Boiled One is awaiting some sort of hell itself to pour into reality, which doesn't sound good no matter what it actually entails. To back it up, the locust is similarly another digital entity that by default I've theorized to exist in a bizarre alternative dimension next to what seems like its heart. The locust seems to gain access to locations via web calls or other digital or analog forms of communication. It does this by posing as loved ones or simply just another human, only for it to appear on your screen and begin breaking through it. Once it escapes, it takes its true physical form, which is an insanely tall entity that specializes in finding you and hunting you down. The locust's most unique ability is when it comes into physical contact, it can easily remove all of your internal organs without even breaking the skin, leaving the bodies quote-unquote appearing untouched. With that being said, who would win this category? I would say the locust is very situational, and he can be easily avoided by simply just unplugging your TV or something. When you come into contact with Siren Head, it's completely random. You can get lured. It is rumored he can also kill via his sound waves, and him being able to go as fast as a moving car just kind of seals the deal. In my opinion, Trevor wins this section. I want to next compare which artist is more disturbing as a whole. Now, since this is largely subjective, I'm going to do my best to give a fair comparison, as both have technically scared me at one point in time when I first discovered them. Trevor Henderson, being the original to draw on this realistic real-life style, does an amazing job of making it seem like you are personally coming into contact with these things in your day-to-day life. However, one thing Dr. Nowhere does have over Trevor is a lot of his work is animated, mainly the Boiled One, Locust, the Oddity Compendium, and a lot of others. Despite entities like Mr. Mascot, the Forgotten Baby, and the Body of the Pig being absolute nightmare fuel, I think currently Nowhere does deserve this point, as I think nowadays Nowhere's entities are a lot more disturbing to me. But what do you guys think? For our next section, I think this video would be a lot more interesting if we did one focusing on survivability. And since I've technically made survival videos on them both, I can easily compare the two and see which one is significantly worse. When it comes to Silas's verse, there are a lot of entities that mess with your mind, stalk you, and distort your body to the point where you're not even you anymore. And to explain exactly what I mean by that, I'm going to be going over the corrupted soil and the fungus. The fungus is a disturbing plant-like entity that spreads into both living and non-living items over time. They incubate, and gigantic mushrooms begin to sprout out, themselves emitting more spores, and the cycle repeats. The problem is when it comes into contact with humans, it appears to replace the entire skeletal structure, ending the person in the process, and replacing them with another one of these mushroom entities. I've assumed something like this would make life very difficult in affected towns, and on top of this, similar to the fungus, there's another blight labeled the corrupted soil, said to stem from one large graphic mass and sprouting through the soil hundreds of miles in every direction. When it comes in contact with populated homes, everything living inside is then horribly disfigured. This is not even to mention the mind-corrupting creatures such as the previously mentioned Boiled One, the Dream Demon MT3, and Cone Zones, all of which, in summary, melt your sanity as they trap you in permanent hells, where all you can do is be tormented by them. Now, Trevor Henderson's verse is like a whole different beast. Putting the cartoon cat aside for now, I'm going to be focusing mainly on the man with the upside-down face and the Forgotten Baby. Now, I have been told in my comments that the Forgotten Baby mainly targets pregnant women, but I wasn't able to actually find a source that confirms that. Mostly just that it originated from an accident in the maternity ward and then spreads out from hospitals, breaking into people's homes, and just completely wiping them out. It shares the too late section with the cartoon cat and essentially has never been escaped. On top of this, it is incredibly silent and disturbing, being described as a muted TV channel. On top of this, we have the absolute demon of terrible freak accidents, otherwise known as the man with the upside down face, who essentially is invisible to 90% of people, with the 10% being extremely young children that most people don't believe until it's too late. The man is essentially a manifester of major accidents that he is said to have been seen in the background of. When looking in photos taken just prior, he is always there, causing car crashes, plane malfunctions, construction accidents, the list goes on. This ends up with thousands of casualties of people that don't even know he was there. To top this all off, what really makes Trevor's universe unsurvivable is just the sheer scale of entities that you have to deal with. You have ones that sit on the trains, you have ones that on buses, in the water, you have massive giant entities that level cities, you have digital entities. My point is there isn't anywhere you can go where there wouldn't be something horrific, so I'm going to go ahead and give this one to Trevor. When it comes to comparing which universe has more content and is more fleshed out and looking into the backstories, you really have two different pictures to paint. Trevor's images, for the most part, come from one of two places, either one of his socials or through his podcast, the Mayfair Watchers Society, which actually gives context on a lot of his entities, two notable ones being the Anxious Dogs and the Scissors entity, which notably is another ode to why Trevor's universe is just hell on earth. Scissors, for those unfamiliar, infects houses and in turn neighborhoods. Once a place is infected, it is assumed he will appear sort of like a spirit and chase down any living creatures, goring them with its sharp appendages. Now, as I've mentioned a few times before in this video, Trevor has made a tier list based on how dangerous these things are, which has also been a huge help for figuring out context on a lot of these things. Other than that, the intrigue of his images come from just how unfathomable they are, and how they do come from the perspective of someone just strolling along on a walk and then suddenly noticing something that they will probably never understand. Alternatively, Silas, as I've mentioned a few sections back, takes a very different approach to his artwork. Rather than putting them all as obvious posts, you really have to search for his work, with it being split between many socials, mainly his Instagram and his YouTube channel. Most of his work, from the Boiled One TOE tapes and the Oddity Compendium, you again see a much broader picture being painted for a lot of his entities. With that being said, a lot of his entities do seem to be sort of lost. And when I say lost, I mean lost to my standards in the fact that I cannot figure out where the hell most of them come from and their original sources. And in that regard, they do have a lot of the same mystery that Trevor's do. But the fact that he even has his own analog horror series based off one of his entities honestly says it all. However, it is worth noting that Trevor has an extremely large fanverse, with Siren Head alone having upwards of like 20 indie horror games made from it. On top of this, many people have made animated versions of Trevor's work, but I don't think fan work can count towards this, as it's not technically made by them, just inspired. So based off the sheer volume of animated and fleshed out lore made for his entities, I'm gonna have to give this one to him. Now, earlier in the video I went over the most viral entities, and I've been kind of throwing around the word lost entities a lot, so I'm gonna go ahead and compare the lost entities of both Dr.Nowhere and Trevor Henderson in the case that they're very rare and a lot of people don't even know they exist. But with that being said, I did have to do a lot of digging for these, but I did manage to find a lot of interesting ones that I'd never heard about before on Trevor's website. This first entity I'm going to be talking about looks like something you'd be finding in an abandoned grocery store, in a scenario sort of like this. Picture you're doing some early 3 a.m. shopping at one of those 24-hour stores. Weird old-timey music is playing over the speakers. It's a bit creepy, but you hear another shopper a few aisles down, so it's not that bad. Suddenly, every single light goes off and you're just barely able to see the light of some of the freezers. Calling out for some sort of staff doesn't prove to be useful at all, as all you can hear is your own voice echoing off the walls of the near empty store. Well, that and the sound of the other customer's cart coming closer. You assume he probably is just as confused as you are. But when it starts to get closer, you start to hear a weird crushing sound, almost as if flesh is being run over. Suddenly the sound stops one aisle over, and after what seems like forever, you look up and notice a deformed and almost melted imitation of a head peering over the top of the aisle at you. In shock of what you're even looking at, you watch in horror as the head disappears down and the noise begins to get closer again. Running for the front door didn't really do you any good, as the lack of power essentially makes them near impossible to open. It is only then that you turn around to briefly get a look at this abomination. Now, of course, that's just my guess on what the backstory could be, and Trevor himself likely has something completely different. But regardless, the next things I wanted to include in this is something that actually caught me off guard when I was watching the recent horror movie Tarot. Essentially, I couldn't express how excited I was figuring out that Trevor Henderson actually designed all the entities in the movie. And I don't know how I called it, but I was just so used to making videos on him that I noticed the style way before I even looked, and then I managed to confirm it online. And this isn't even covering the dozens of entities hidden on the wiki that most people probably haven't even seen because of how incredibly obscure a lot of them are. With this in mind, we would likely expect Trevor to easily get this point, but to be honest, it wasn't that simple. Dr. Nowhere's entities, like I mentioned before, are split into two. The ones that you can obviously see on his socials, and then the ones that are a little bit more hidden that you really only see in his quick compilations that are thrown up on his Instagram. Most of these are likely hidden on a Patreon or something like that, but most casual fans aren't able to see it. So I was able to do some digging and figure out some cool ones. My favorite of which would likely play out something like this. Picture you show up for school or work one day, only to realize that your friend isn't there. A few days go by and still nothing. Now, this does start to worry you, but you're really unable to do much, so you just start your way home, only for this poster to catch your eye. Before the instinct to GTFO kicks in, you see a balloon in the corner of your eye, and with it a long hand grab your shoulder. I think you found who took your friend. To be honest, it's just the tip of the iceberg for the illegal balloon salesman. And I technically didn't even need to create a scenario around this image for it to be bizarre, as it already has a couple other oddities that are listed on its wiki article, like each balloon containing odd surprises, such as an embryo that when placed in gasoline of all things, grows into a direct copy of itself and duplicates it, and so on and so forth. He also has a few other noticeably interesting ones, such as the Doctor, which is essentially a gigantic entity that shows up in photograph before taking you from existence, as well as a gigantic flea that assumably drains people to death, all by possessing a haunted humanoid face, and similar to Trevor, many others. So for this one, I can't possibly give either a point, as both have amazing rabbit holes that you can dive down in your spare time, and almost guaranteed find an entity that you've never thought of before. Next up, as I mentioned, I've done survival videos on both of them, but I've also given them both episodes in my Your Life In series, which is essentially going over the quality of life in each universe. So I'm going to be comparing the two to see which one actually has a worse quality of life. To start off, Silas's universe is particularly inconvenient because it renders a lot of the things that we're used to using either unusable or incredibly limited due to the dangers that come with it. For an example, the Boiled One and the Locust make all electronics risky because it's essentially how they get in. On top of that, Philbism is a rampant mind virus that essentially makes you digest wooden chairs as a religion. All it takes is a random ad, and then boom, your new life goal is to ingest as many chairs as possible. With this in mind, phones, TVs, PCs, and most other electronics would all be huge liabilities. On top of this, you would also have to check every single room in your house on a consistent basis and keep a high sense of morality, as if you manage to slip up and do something morally questionable, I'll just say, a disturbing rendition of an angel will appear and burn you to death. Now, if all that seems bad to you, you really haven't seen anything yet. In Trevor's universe, you are basically guaranteed death, not just because you'll be found, but I would like to bet that you'd be throwing yourself to one of them after living for more than a few minutes here. Basically, to start off, just forget feeling safe in your house, as there will consistently be things staring at you through your windows, breaking in through your vents, or simply just appearing in your bedroom. And even if you do manage to bunker yourself in and I guess have a ton of luck, there will still be a serious risk of your entire house just being completely leveled by a Titanic-sized entity. So what are your other options? As we've established, you can't really go anywhere to avoid these things, and that includes shopping, school, work, the movie theater, a nature walk, and pretty much any other place that you can think of. So with that in mind, Trevor definitely wins this section, and it's not even close for this one. Coming back to the intro of this video, I want to go over each one's physical entities, basically the threats that are right in front of you. When it comes to these, Dr. Nowhere has his fair share, as we have bigger entities like Amber, the Obelisk, the Birthday Giant, and one I just recently discovered called the Griever of Lavender Skies, which itself is almost a haunting mystery. All I was able to figure out about it is that it stands about as tall as a telephone line and appears to have nothing inside of it, along with most of its appendages removed. Regardless of what it is, I don't think I'd ever want to come into contact with something like this, especially not at night on the way home. Now, all of these bigger entities, unlike Trevor's giants, are extremely big enough to be threatening, but they're not too big to the fact that they wouldn't bother with you. So it's sort of a terrifying medium. On top of this, Nowhere also has a lot of smaller entities that would have no problem making their way into your home. I'm mostly talking about Father Fester and Black Hat Trench, both of which I've went over in my survival videos, and they would likely mean you're going to be forced to pack up and move across the country. Not to mention the follower that appears anywhere when you turn the lights off, and it will immediately try and run you down. So with that being said, what does Trevor have to counter this? Starting with his giants, they are definitely what you would call something to behold. From the Birdwatcher and the Wandering Faith, who, if you're unfamiliar, specializes in sort of fishing around with its tentacles for people to personally deliver to heaven, so to speak. And they honestly keep getting larger all the way up to the Behemoth, which I don't even know how it doesn't just destroy the entire planet. When it comes to Trevor's smaller entities, however, we have a ton to choose from. From Body of a Pig, Mr. Mascot, whatever the hell this abomination is, the VHS creature, the Roving Man, The amount of creatures as mentioned before is just unfathomable, and that's not even going over the earlier mentions like Cartoon Cat and the assumably similar entity Cartoon Dog. In my opinion, Nowhere's universe honestly can't compete on this one either. In all fairness, Trevor has had far more time to create hundreds of these things, and a majority of them are physical entities. Alternatively, we also are going to be looking over psychological entities, which are more Nowhere's strength. Hell, both of his most popular entities are psychological. On top of this, we have cone zones, who appear only in psych wards to torment already mentally affected patients. We have Neff, who honestly is pretty confusing, but my best guess is that it's some sort of deformed protagonist of a lost TV show in the verse. We have Empty Dot 3. It honestly seems like psychological and digital entities make up a good portion of Silas's verse. Not to mention, there really isn't that many Trevor entities to go up against in this category, apart from maybe the Fetid King and Bonesworth. Now, I could be wrong with this one, and there might be a lot of psychological Trevor entities that I'm missing, so feel free to let me know down in the comments if there's any that come to your mind. As of now, this point is going to go to Nowhere. To finish off the video, we have the most interesting category in my opinion, which is essentially how much of humanity would be completely wiped out by these creatures suddenly becoming real. Because being honest, I don't think most of us are going to be surviving either verse. Hell, Trevor's giants alone are going to wipe out most cities, almost as if they got hit by a hurricane or a massive earthquake. We are talking like hundreds of deaths just by walking, and even more if it was somehow aggravated. Cartoon Cat, being generous, assumably takes at least dozens of lives per day, as it can be anywhere it wants and no one has been known to be able to escape it. You add onto that the scissors neighborhoods, bridge worms, and highway worms picking off anyone that uses a bridge, and you are already looking at thousands dead every day just from those. And then we have the smoking gun, the god of roadkill. The god of roadkill, for those unaware, guarantees death for anyone who runs over any kind of animal, and statistics show in the US alone, even lowballing it, upwards of 500,000 animals are hit by cars every day, which it is unknown if every accident would count towards this, but even if you take a fraction, let's say 10,000 of those people are then forced into a car crash, it would be mayhem. World population would crash within a year, and it's likely it would be halved at bare minimum. So can Dr. Nowhere beat this number? Well, the short answer, being honest, not really. And that's because that's often not the point. Many of Silas's creatures are designed to be weirdly comforting, but at the same time, incredibly disturbing. But the ones that do, as I mentioned before, for the most part, torture, not kill, which is arguably worse. But we do have a few entities that would put them fairly close, mainly the Onklager and Philbus. You've probably heard of multiple times before, but the Onklager would be the majority of what puts the deaths on the map, as basically anyone who has been consistently morally evil has the chance of attracting one. They can be anything from short and human-sized to gigantic and horrific. Regardless, the only reason this doesn't win Nowhere at this point is because of the fact that most of the time people get an option to repent for what they did and be genuinely remorseful, and if they are, it will leave them alive. Locust is also another thing that would be adding on to this, but in the end, I think Trevor inches the point for this one. So it seems that Trevor is going to be the winner of this video. However, it is a lot closer than I initially thought it was going to be when I made this video. But this doesn't surprise me too much, as Nowhere, in my opinion, is the only other artist that comes close in this genre. Regardless, I want to go ahead and shout out both Dr. Nowhere and Trevor Henderson. I'll be linking them both in the description below. If you guys want to go check out their work, I heavily suggest you do. They are both extremely talented and fucking amazing, honestly. And if y'all like this video, make sure to show me that you want more content like this by dropping a like. That's how I'm going to be gauging if y'all like it enough for a part 2. And alternatively, if y'all thought the results were bullshit, let me know why in the comments as well.